Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Jobology podcast. I'm your host, Brandon, and today we have a real special one for you. It's our first in-studio guest. Before we get to him, a couple quick reminders. Please make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and all major platforms for podcasting. Double check, make sure you're following us on all social media platforms at Jobology Podcast. We really appreciate the support. My guest today is a good friend of mine. His name is Sam. He used to work in the financial industry, so we're going to discuss that. We're going to talk about his biggest client, biggest portfolio that he's worked with, and we're going to discuss what to do if you encounter fraud. So without further ado, Sam. Let me just introduce my friend Sam. Sam, how are you doing today?
Not too bad. Finally, we're able to get this together. It's been a while. I know, a long time due.
Definitely. We've been trying to plan a podcast. This is my first in-person podcast, by the way, crew. So bear with me here. So as I said in the beginning here, we're talking about financial advising. I was under the impression that your job was financial advisor. But the question I guess I want to start with here is, what would you say, like, if I were to ask you, hey, Sam, what do you do for a living? Versus what is the title on your business card? How would you answer that or differentiate the two?
Kind of avoiding titles, I would say more so I'm a guide in terms of managing people's money.
Okay.
A lot of the time, what I specifically was focused on was individuals that had, either retired or sold a business and had a large lump sum of money and wanted to put it away for the future. So they wanted to invest it in more safer assets, which is what my category was, so that in the long term they can get returns and eventually maybe use the money in retirement and dwindle it out until, unfortunately, the day they're not on this earth anymore.
Gotcha. Okay.
Or even pass it on to their heirs. So that something to it's what we would jokingly say in the job is we're helping wealthy people stay wealthy.
Well, there you go. That seems like a pretty concise way to figure that out. When you're like, what was your official title?
My official title was client portfolio manager.
Okay.
So I'm kind of the intermediary between the people that actually manage the money and make the purchases on assets, which bonds, equities, if you're familiar with those terminology. And then I'm the one relaying the message to the client saying, hey, this is what we're doing with your money. This is why we made this decision. This is what the market is telling us, so that they could understand what we're doing with their money, essentially.
Gotcha. Okay. And then this is, what area of the United States are you doing this in?
So most of the time when you get big financial institutions, they're going to be in your big metro cities. I was located in Chicago. Okay. But there's definitely, our company alone had branches in New York, Los Angeles, even overseas, London. So it really could be done anywhere, but Chicago was our home base.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. I guess my question is, what got you into this originally, or like why financial advising, or why working in finance at all?
That's a great question. I think a lot of people are like, why deal with money? I mean, I guess you get some of those individuals that avoid numbers and like numbers. Finance, you're definitely one with the numbers, I would say. In college, I studied finance, graduated with a degree, a BA in finance. So I felt that, you see a lot of individuals that, especially at the time I was an athlete, you see athletes that have a lot of money and don't know what to do with it. They end up becoming broke or, working a regular job when they were making millions of dollars. So in my head, it was like, if I ever were to make a lot of money, I want to know what to do with it. So I studied finance. And from there, it was a matter of kind of out of college, you want to get any job, really. I didn't have a specific kind of idea of this is what I wanted as a job. It was just like, I learned all this stuff in college. I want to put it to use and kind of grow from there and make money as well. Because compared to a lot of other jobs out of college, finance tends to be your top tier. Mm-hmm. You're going to get paid a bit more, but it's also very, very competitive. You got to have, skills that you bring to the table. A lot of times these entry-level jobs are asking for 2 to 5 years of experience when you're like, I was just graduated from college. How am I going to have 2 to 5 years of work experience?
Not possible.
So that's where the idea of an internship comes into play. Through my latter end of college, I started taking an internship with a financial advisor. So to differentiate, what I was doing, I was more so under a corporation, a big financial institution. They were the ones that bring in the clients. and then we just deal with their money. A financial advisor is more so on their own. They're bringing in their own book, their own portfolio, and then they're using bigger financial institutions to invest in their products.
Gotcha. Okay, so is that going back a little bit real quick here? So is that it's something you have to go to college to?
Correct.
In order to get your job, you have to go to college. You get your degree. Is it in finance, or is there a specific is there like a sub degree? I don't.
Honestly, honestly, you really could study anything. I've had colleagues that were English majors, literature majors, so it really doesn't matter the specific in terms of what you studied. But again, you're gonna need to understand financial metrics, financial terminology. So that's what college helped me understand. It taught you the basics, and then you learn the rest on the job. But again, I mean, if you're good with numbers, you could be good at this job.
Okay. And if you don't mind sharing, what college did you graduate?
Yeah, I went to the University of San Diego.
Okay. Nice.
A nice little private school down in San Diego.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm from San Diego originally.
Shout out San Diego.
But yeah, it's a great campus, a great environment over there. Okay. So you have the degree, go to school for finance, get your degree. What next? Is it something where somebody, you're out on your own trying to find a job? Is there somebody helping you find a job? Like, what kind of is the next step once you graduate into getting that first job?
So I definitely took it into my own terms of I reached out. I think the key to getting good jobs is networking. Word of mouth, when you have someone backing you that is trusted by the company or those that are hiring, it puts you above the competition versus just filling out an application online and blindly sending it. You may get the job. Sometimes you do. If you're a great candidate and you qualify, you may get it. But most of the time, they're going to give it to someone they know and feel comfortable with. Yeah. So out of college, I took an internship by networking. I started working with a lady out of San Diego. Her financial advisory studio was there in downtown San Diego. Was working for free, so that was tough. Okay. Because you want to get paid for the work you do, but sometimes in order to be in that position, you got to take an apprenticeship and work for free.
To take the next step, you got to do some other work that you might want to do. Gotcha.
So I did that for about a year. I worked for free under her, networked as well. She introduced me to a lot of more individuals in the business, and from there, I began to meet people. I met this guy that we went to the same high school, St. Augustine. Shout out to Saints. But we had never met. But I reached out to him on LinkedIn and said, hey, fellow Saintsman, I'm looking for a job. This is what I've been doing. This is what I plan on looking for. And he's like, hey, we connected, talked on the phone. He actually introduced me to other friends. I kept having conversations and letting people know, like, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Keep me in mind. If you hear an opportunity, here's my resume. And finally, at the company he was working at, there was an opening in Chicago while I lived in San Diego. Oh, wow. So it was pre-pandemic. So we were doing Zoom interviews before Zoom interviews were a thing.
Yeah. Before it's the popular way to do it now.
Exactly. And so at that time I was interviewing for multiple jobs of, either in LA, New York, Chicago. So I really was mobile, and I just really wanted an opportunity. The Chicago opportunity came to fruition quicker than the other ones. Okay. So I took that, moved all my stuff and moved over to Chicago and began a job as a client portfolio manager.
So do they help you with that move? I mean, obviously you're moving almost cross country. Is that something you have to come out of pocket for completely? Do they go, hey, we'll subsidize some of this? Is there any help with that?
Most of the time they did help with relocation. Again, I didn't have a family. I didn't have a lot of planned things that I needed to bring with me. So it was quite simple. I think they gave me a couple $1,000 just to help with the moving. Okay. But most of the time they would, if they really like you and they know that you're living somewhere else, they'll help you relocate. Okay. That's usually part of it.
I was always curious about that because I've never had to necessarily really relocate for a job. And I've always wondered, do they just make you come out of pocket for that? That seems a little, I don't know, strange to me.
Yeah. No, I definitely, I mean, I'm sure there are situations where they don't help, but I believe that if it's a good job and a good company that cares about its people, they will help you relocate.
Okay. So let's recap real quick. We got go to college, decide on finance, graduate with the finance degree, reach out to people either through LinkedIn. That seems to be the most popular thing nowadays. Yeah. Reach out, put it out there, put the feelers out there. Hey, looking for a job. talk to the right people, interview for the job, and then we're going to hire you, move to Chicago.
And I will throw, I mean, I really, especially because I played sports in college, I didn't really have a chance to take as many internships as a lot of these, more academically focused college students are.
Right.
So I took on another kind of, what would you call it? Certification.
Okay.
So I started pursuing the CFA, which is a chartered financial analyst certification, which helps, they kind of compare it to like an MFA, a 1-year master's program that you can, another thing you can put on your title and kind of help you differentiate yourself from the competition.
Gotcha.
So there was 3 levels to that. And I had passed the first one while I was interviewing for this job. So that really helped because they're like, oh man, this guy's
you like a step ahead of the competition.
Exactly. Gotcha. And so there was a couple of people that were working there already that had the certification already. So they're like, oh, when they were talking to me, they're, wow, you just graduated and you're doing this already. So they really like set me apart.
Okay, impressive. Gotcha. Okay, that's something good to keep in mind, is that you don't necessarily have to, have the most connections, the most everything, but a couple good ones and the right certification
and the effort. I think they really saw that I was, with what I had, they saw that I was putting the most effort possible. And I think that's, again, when we speak about trying to get a job, it's people are trying to gauge if they can work with you. They want to see the type of person you are, that they can trust you, that you're going to go the extra mile when the time is needed. Right. And I think that helped me differentiate myself.
I mean, I don't think I could have said it better myself. That makes the most sense to me, is that, you take the time to build yourself, and then the other people are going to see that time and reward that.
I will say it wasn't easy, because those times where, you get interviews and you make it to the second, third round, and then they go, you never hear from them again, and they go with someone else.
Ghosted.
It gets tough because especially when you're working for free and you're like, you got bills to pay, you got gas. Yep. And, so there was points in time where I mentally had to realign myself, because the light at the end of the tunnel got a little further away.
So you get the job at the financial institution. Are you hired on as client portfolio manager, or are you hired on as like a different role and then you made it to that role?
I started as an analyst.
Okay.
So analyst is more entry level, base salary. Usually the luxury of finance is you tend to have a higher starting salary. I started around 50,000.
Okay, base salary for base salary 50,000. Okay.
Which is when in college, when you're looking at jobs, they give you ranges. The range was around 40 to 70 as a starting salary for
falls in that range.
Finance.
Yeah.
I also was interviewing for like investment banking roles, which is your more top tier entry level roles. Okay, those are working for more of the sales side. Gotcha. And you're working for big companies, JP Morgan, your Goldman Sachs, and these are programs. So they accept students and college students into these programs. They're 2-year programs. You start as an analyst, you work your way up. They're working you hard. Yeah, I mean, this is one thing we'll get in later, is the work-life balance that I enjoyed with my job. But investment banking was one that it was the highest paying entry-level job. So I was like, hey, let's try to go for it. And I mean, it's rigorous. I mean, you're going through 5 to 6 rounds of interviews. You're getting pummeled with random questions of like, hey, there's a bowl of M&Ms in here. How many M&Ms are in this bowl? And so you have to mathematically walk through how you would come to an answer like that. Out, yeah. They want to see your thought process. When you're thrown into the deep end.
I would get, no, that's why I don't do that job. Not a chance.
And but it prepares you for what the job is. Sure. Because once you're on the job and you're dealing with clients, they want confidence. They want to hear someone on the other end that's like, this is what I'm doing with your money. Exactly. This is how we're managing it. This is why we're doing that. Because if they hear any bit of doubt or fear, they're going to pounce on that, because these are wealthy individuals that worked hard for their money. Yeah.
I used to work at a bank, and that's like the worst thing you could tell somebody is when they ask you something with their money. I mean, you can say, I don't know, but man, that is a tough one, because people are like, what do you mean you don't know? Well, and it's like, I'll figure it out. Yeah, don't worry, I'll figure it out. But the start of like an I don't know when you're dealing with people, that is not. Yeah, like, so you have to be very certain, very like direct.
Can you put someone on the phone that knows?
Exactly. Yeah. Can we get someone else in here? Yeah. So it start as an analyst. Is what's the kind of pathway to becoming that client portfolio manager?
So
is it like incentive based? Is it more of like you hit all these goals, so now you get to move on? What's kind of like, how do you?
Well, it kind of depends on institution. Mine was more, they gave you the freedom of kind of dabbling in different things, putting on different hats so that you can pick your avenue.
Okay.
Because a lot of people come in as analysts, but then they end up going into portfolio managing or they go into research. So they give you the opportunity to kind of take your career where you want to go.
Okay.
Other times, other institutions will have a path for you. They're saying you came in this program and you will follow this 2-year program, then you get promoted, do another 2 years, then you get promoted. So, I mean, a lot of people like that certainty, but then I appreciate more of the flexibility of being able to say, hey, I'm interested in research. Let me talk to the research analyst, see what they did, how they got to that point, give you some more background on what they do.
Gotcha. That's okay. And then we become the client portfolio manager.
That was after 2 years of working. I got my first promotion and bonus.
Okay.
So another luxury of finance is you have bonus season every year. The company does well. At the end of the year, they'll announce bonuses, and most of the time, we've been in a financial kind of boom since the 1990s. So every company's doing quite well. They'll offer you a bonus, and usually either a title change or a higher salary.
Okay.
Or you're fired, which you never want those.
Want that bonus.
Yeah, you don't want that pink slip.
Bonus, you have a lot more time to look for a new job.
There you go. Which is a lot of turnover comes at bonus season because people want to wait till they get the bonus, and then they'll either take a new job that pays more, or they want to go a different direction, or go back to school. Get an MBA. Our company initially before the pandemic helped pay for your MBA. Okay. So a lot of individuals that were working were also going through their MBA while they were working.
Oh, so they have like assistance with that. That makes sense. Okay, because it's in their best interest too, I would assume, to have somebody that's more.
But the thing is
education, more certification.
The fear there is that if they pay for it and then you leave.
So do they make you sign like a contract or something?
You do have to,
like, I'll be here for 5 years or something like that. Or
not that, but they won't fully pay for it. They'll partially help. But then again, there are some. I didn't really go through that program, but I think you had to stay at least for 2 years after you graduate, and then from there you can kind of take it as you go.
Okay. So we get the promotion. Now we're the client portfolio manager. That comes with a pay increase?
Correct.
Is there a range that you could say typically you could expect to make from that pay increase?
It's usually like the average increase is going to be around 5 to 7% a year. I mean, sometimes you get a 10 to 20% increase when you, either you got promoted to more of a managerial role, but I just went more of just taking on more responsibilities. I wasn't managing anyone. Okay. So I went from 50, I think, to 60. So 10,000. And that includes a bonus as well.
That's nice.
Because that's up front.
That's a nice little bump. And then now, as the client portfolio manager, so the manager in that title is managing the portfolios, not managing like people.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay.
So so that became more dealing with bigger clients. I got the luxury of dealing with our biggest client at the time. I was going
to say, let's talk bigger clients.
Yeah, big client. I mean, we're talking of upwards of $500 million. So
that's like across all their different things that they have. Or
this is the distinction:
like stocks. Like, what are we? I don't even know.
So yeah, the distinction is this $500 million book comes to our company and they say, hey, we have over 300 clients, and together that accumulates to 500 million.
Gotcha.
And so then each client has a different solution that they need for their money. So they'll either be in equities, they'll be in bonds, but our job is to figure out what the client needs in terms of based on their age, based on their income requirement, based on any tax implications, expenses, etc. We'll find a solution for them, because as our company, we had the whole umbrella of anything you want, you can pick.
Gotcha. Okay. So if, let's say I'm coming with my portfolio of business and I go, okay, I want to save for the future, but I also want to, make some gains on this money, then that's where you can go, cool, I'm going to send this to here and I'm going to send this to here so that we can.
Exactly. Gotcha. So we find the right formula in terms of percentages of most of the time, our typical client at the time was someone that was maybe 65, 70, just retired or sold their business, have maybe $5 to $10 million liquid. That's like, hey, I need, at least $6,000 to $7,000 a month to live, and then the rest you can invest elsewhere for hopefully my
Diversify.
grandchildren or
Gotcha.
to gain more profit.
Okay.
So then from there you usually put them in a model of like, okay, maybe 60% here, 40% here, or maybe 70% here, 15% here, 10% here.
Something.
The divvy up the pie somehow so that it fits their solution.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Because I mean, obviously, if you have that much money, I'm sure you want to do different things with it. It's not all just, hey, put this in a savings and then let's call it a day. What is another big portion of the podcast that we always like to talk about is what is your day to day like? So I'm not talking. Obviously, we're gonna have the outlier days where things are out of control, crazy, and then you're like, wow, that day nothing seemed to happen. So we're not necessarily talking about those, but more of a like your average day to day. Like, what time are you getting in? Are you having to go into an office? Are you working from home? What time? What does kind of the morning look like? What's lunch look like? What's the end of the day look like? So if you could give us like maybe just a typical average day in the life of a client portfolio.
And this differentiates with asset class because I worked in fixed income, which is more of your, you buy a bond and you hold it to maturity. So that's like more of your laid back side of, I would say, the finance.
The passive side.
The passive side, correct. And then the more active is the equity.
Gotcha.
So your day to day is going to differentiate based on asset class.
Okay.
So
from your perspective, what would like I guess I don't want to say passive day, but what would a day as a passive client portfolio manager look like?
Exactly. So we go off New York Financial Time. So in Chicago, we start around 7.
Okay.
I'd come in, wake up around 5, get in around 7. Check emails. I'd have to, a lot of the marketing material we put out, I'd have to put together the data behind it. So
hold on, wait, stop, time out. We got. You start at 7, but you're getting up at 5.
Yeah.
Do you commute for 2 hours?
I do.
Holy Christ.
I was taking the train into work.
Okay, I was like, I mean, maybe there's like a whole morning routine where you're like, no, I got to do.
Well,
all
I
this,
had breakfast.
Sure, but I was like, wait, why is that? Why is it so? Oh wow. Okay.
It took an hour to take the train. So, and this was pre-pandemic again. So these trains were packed
of people
in the morning. Everyone's heading
to their. Okay.
Yeah. So it's just interesting to see now the trains are empty. Everyone's working remotely. No one has to commute to work really.
Okay.
So yeah, that was
okay. So like we got the 2 hour commute.
Correct.
So that's something to keep in mind. Obviously, whenever you're looking for a job, you want to count that into because that counts to your time of the day. I mean, that's your free time. So take the 2 hour commute. We get into the office. Your goal is to get in by 8, roughly, or
7.
7. Sorry,
7. I was usually getting there around 7:30. I was
Okay.
pushing it. It's just I'm not a morning person.
Gotcha.
I was one of those. I was
Fair.
falling asleep sometimes on the train.
Okay.
I missed my exit one time. I'll just.
Oh, brother. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I fell asleep on this lady, and she was like, "Get off me." So interesting mornings, yeah. Morning commutes make for an interesting time.
there's interesting people on the train apparently. Okay, so in by 7:30, and then are you working cubicle? Are you working in an office? Are you working in a What's the
It was
setup?
cubicle life. Not the. I would say we're sitting so much. It's like I should have gotten a stand-up desk.
Okay.
I should have gotten a stand-up desk, or at least just a more comfortable chair because
Something.
yeah, it takes a toll on the body to be sitting for 8 hours a day.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially if if you got to be kind of tied to the computer.
Which is about the job. It's now that we're remote, this job is all
everything
laptop based. Okay. Like if you have Wi-Fi, you really could work from anywhere.
Okay. And I think that's the direction. I feel like that's the direction a lot of jobs are going now, where they're like, well, we can either have this candidate base right here in our city that can make the commute, or we can expand our candidate base to anyone ever in the entire world. That kind of seems like the way to go.
But the one funny thing about finance, I'd say it's very old fashioned. They believe in face. They want to see face to face. I think it's because of a matter of trust.
Okay.
We're dealing with money,
Sure.
so they feel more comfortable when they can see you and physically
weird.
in the office.
Yeah.
And it may be more of a control thing of like
Sure.
if you're here in the office, I know you're working.
Yeah.
But they like to be able to walk over to your desk and say, hey, what are you working on? What are you doing? Can you help me with this? And also I would say the average age of the finances was like, I was the youngest, myself and another lady that was hired from college. We were the youngest by far. I mean, we were 24, 23, and the next closest was 33.
Oh, wow.
So we were the age, differentiation was quite large there.
Gotcha. Okay. Got the morning.
So then
you
okay.
get into the office. You're working in the cubicle. You fire up the laptop, fire up the computer, and then it's straight to emails. It's straight to what?
Straight to emails. It was either like checking ones that were sent when I left the office, because one of the things I did like about my job was they really believed in work-life balance. Okay. So once you were off the clock, say around 5 or 6, unless you wanted to work extra, which some people I would say more of the sales side, which is reaching out to clients, we're working off the clock. Yeah. Ourselves that we're just managing money, we're based off the finance time. So once the market is closed, we really can't do much.
Okay.
So that was checking emails overnight of clients saying like, hey, I checked my account last night. Why is it down?
Gotcha.
And so you just respond to those. Again, send out the data for the marketing material. And then we'd have our Monday meetings where we're all the groups are reconvening, recapping what happened for the week. And then we go back and go back to answer daily emails. Okay. I mean, we were more of response team where, daily we're getting inquiries from clients. So we're responding immediately.
So you're not doing like sales calls for like, okay, we got to reach out and try and bring in new clients. Well, it's more of managing the ones that already exist, or is it both?
Well, it was a mixture of both because we were considered the specialists in our asset class. So I focus more on municipal bonds, which are a tax-free vehicle for wealthy individuals to avoid paying taxes in their own state. So all the time I was either doing current client calls where they're already a client, they just want a market update, they just want an account update, or I was doing new prospects where they want to find out, why should I invest in this asset? And so I'm the specialist to come in and explain, this is why you need this in your portfolio. Okay,
that makes sense. So do that. Lunchtime comes. You get an hour lunch, half an hour lunch. What do we working on?
I guess I was a busy bee because I was heavily sought after for calls. They just enjoyed having me on the call. So I was usually eating my lunch at my desk, and kind of taking 30 minutes to myself. But some other people like taking hour lunches and they walk out and go walk and. Chicago's a little cold, so once it was cold, I wasn't leaving the office.
No chance. Not a chance.
But yeah, it was kind of more free base of you take your lunch when you have the time. Again, be mindful, don't be gone for 3 hours of the day. But some people took an hour if you wanted to meet with a friend. Like I sometimes took lunches with friends in the area, and kind of made it my own. But again, it's more of taking the responsibility that makes sure your job is done. Okay. Because again, if you're walking around and you're unanswered emails and
don't leave things open.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Because then we also my boss, my direct boss, would be checking like, hey, this email hasn't been responded to in an hour. Where's everybody at? So that's a kind of accountability there where you're responding to emails saying, hey, I'm going to respond to this, or hey, I'm going to take care of this, so that everyone knows what's going on.
Okay. And then what time is end of day? Like, what time are we looking for the clock at when we're like, cool, we're out of here, time to go?
End of day was around 5. Especially even earlier because
I was going to say, what about 4? Because
4 is where we do.
If we work in New York, they're done at 5.
Correct. But then you get clients that are calling in after 4. They're not. We stopped trading at 4 because the market closes. But then you could still look up accounts, respond to emails. So like there was stuff that you could do off market that would take that 4 to 5 period. Gotcha. I was usually leaving around 5:30. And then going to the gym and living my life outside of work.
Okay, that's actually a great segue to the next portion. Something that I really find interesting about jobs, and that I think a lot of people want to know about jobs, is when the day is over, are you done, or are you still on the clock technically of like, hey, I still got to answer emails. I'm not maybe I'm not getting paid for it technically, but I got to answer emails. I got to answer calls, or is it I turn the phone off and then when I get back to the office, phone goes back on. How does that?
So I was paid salary. So we were assumed to have a 60-hour week. Okay. Whether you worked those 60 hours or not, or whether you worked more or less, you're still getting paid for those 60 hours. I was more of like, I made sure all my stuff was answered. And once 5:30 hit, I'm not checking. Okay. I was, and it worked for me because, I worked hard. That's why I ate my lunch at my desk, because I wanted to work hard while I'm there, and then once I was off, I'm off.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's something. Obviously, doing this podcast gig is a little different, but I'm a big fan of like when work's done, let people be done with work. Like,
Yeah, it's that question of like, are we working to live or are we living to work? You know,
exactly. That's a great way of putting it. Day's over. We got the typical day to day out of the way. Something that I forgot to touch on before that you kind of mentioned here was the pay structure. So it's a salary based job. Is that you're getting paid twice a month? Or are you getting paid once a month? I mean, I have no idea how this works.
No, we're getting paid twice a month by monthly.
Okay.
Yeah, I've heard of friends getting paid once every month, the first of the month. That takes more planning.
Yeah.
Because you got a budget for that whole month. Yeah. I was at least getting paid every 2 weeks. I was maxing out my 401k. I was maxing. They had a pension and a 401k, so I was maxing that out.
Nice.
And so I think the benefit that a lot of people don't look at when they look at jobs is, other benefits of health insurance.
Exactly.
401ks.
Yeah.
How are they paying for your kids' tuition? Because our school also helped, or my job also helped pay for your kids' school sometimes.
Yeah, so there's the hidden benefits
Correct.
that you don't see.
And I think those are ones that you sometimes have to take into account, not just the plain salary.
Yeah. Including work-life balance, like we mentioned. That is a benefit to some people to be able to be like, especially if you have a family or something like that. And you're like, hey, when I'm done, I want to spend time with my kids. I want to spend time with my wife, whatever it is, husband, whatever.
And then there are also other aspects. We had traveling CPMs, which they did the same job for me, but they would go around the country visiting these financial advisors personally and hosting, like, hey, this is our company, this is the product we have, this is why it would work for your clients. So we had I was more office based, but the more senior analysts and managers were traveling.
Gotcha.
So there's ones that were never in the office.
Okay.
But I was myself and the other younger ones were more home based. We would be in the office. Right. We'd be the ones to relay the message to them.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense to me.
So for those that like to travel, there are jobs of the finance side that can help finance you around the country. You may not be going to big cities, but you're going around.
You could see different spots if that's what you're into. And then is there a bonus or incentive structure based with your job specifically?
Since we're not sales directly, we would just get bonuses. We were getting compensation in terms of numbers.
Gotcha.
But we were like, if the company did well, the few years while I was there, the company did well, and our bonuses were nice and hefty. And that usually is around, we were getting bonuses around March.
Okay.
So we'd hear the number around the end of the year, and then they'd get paid out and taxed in March.
What would be, if you don't mind saying, what's like an average bonus check?
I think my first year, because I guess they try to make it performance based. They give you a scale, but again, it's more so of just, as long as you're staying and they like you, you're gonna get around a 7 to 10% bonus. Wow. So I was getting 10, 15,000 in one check. I mean, it's gonna get taxed heavily.
Of course. But, I think at like 60 some odd percent or something.
So I was getting around $8,000 in a bonus.
Not
bad at all.
Too shabby.
Again, there's investment banking alone. The bonuses are a lot nicer, but again, you're also working 80 hours a week. I had friends that worked in investment banking in New York, and they're working till 11, 10 p.m. And then a client will call them and say, "Hey, I need a book, a PDF by tomorrow," so they got to go back and do that. So really, I mean, for me, I think this job was ideal because it helped pay well, but then I also got my work life. I got to live outside of work. Gotcha. I wasn't just working.
So I don't think we've touched on this, and I mean, maybe you guys have caught on if we've said some things in the past tense, but Sam no longer works for the financial institution. So if you wouldn't mind either, kind of sharing with us what you're doing now, and also maybe like what changed your mind or what brought you out of the financial institutions.
And I think this is another thing that we should always maintain as human people is curiosity. I always, I enjoyed what I did, but I was always curious of like, what could I do? So I was asking, the older individuals that have been there longer, that were in positions that, hopefully one day I wanted to be there, like portfolio managers or more of the research analysts. And I was like, hey, do you enjoy your job? Right. What do you do? So this exact podcast, I would sit down and ask them. So because I saw it as eventually I'll be there. And so I wanted to see what my future entailed. And, after a few conversations, I realized that it just wasn't what I wanted to do with my life.
Okay.
But it was great opportunities of like knowledge that I can now share with people in terms of this podcast and stuff. So,
right.
I realized like the pandemic hit. I think that kind of created a whole new shift in terms of, what I wanted to do with my life. I took a hard 360, and I went into more of the artistic arts. I'm an actor now, a model.
Nice.
But that took a process as well, which is why I think everything happens for a reason. And I got that job that I got in Chicago because it gave me the freedom after work to explore more creative and artistic sides of myself with not having to try to get paid for them.
Yeah.
So I was taking classes, I was reaching out free friends, doing photo shoots for free while I was still getting paid for my job, but figuring out like, hey, this is more what I want to do.
This.
Yeah, I like
this.
this.
Is more fun.
This is more fun. I don't care if I get paid for this, but I'll do it.
Right.
And so that I think that comes into another question of like when you're looking for jobs is like, is this the only thing you want to do, or do you want to do a side business, or do you want to do something else outside of that job?
That's mainly the reason that I started doing the podcast was I was working a job that I didn't like, and it was like, I want to do something that's more fun and more interesting to me, and this is it. Yeah. And so I really enjoy doing this. So I totally understand the idea of, okay, yeah, this was awesome. I learned some stuff. This was a good experience, but it doesn't really like get my juices flowing. It doesn't really like spark, the creativity that I want to spark.
I guess it was more of like feeling like I'm using my whole self. Gotcha. Like I was using an aspect of my brain in terms of mathematics and, talking to people, but I felt like I wasn't using the whole creative side that I had, the whole physicality side of like moving and that I feel that the arts allow me to do.
Right.
But it took me taking this job to realize that. Exactly. And so again, like I look back and say like, oh, maybe I should have spent that time working, actually pursuing what I wanted to do. But I felt that I needed to do that job so that it allowed me to realize what I really want to do. Okay. And it really pushed me in that direction.
And then when you're leaving a job like a client portfolio manager, is it all right, see you later, walk you out the door, nice knowing you, talk to us again if you need something, but bye? Or is there some kind of transition into back to a regular?
Well, most of the time when you quit, it's like, well, don't let the door hit you where the good Lord split you.
Exactly. Like, that's what I thought. I was like, oh, they might just like be like, oh,
see ya. And then we need to find someone else to replace you. But again, the pandemic created a whole new shift in how people were transitioning. And so my job was one of the few jobs that I think I ever heard of offering severance packages to leave.
Okay.
And so it was more directed towards the individuals that were on the cusp of retiring.
Sure.
So they were trying to kind of push them out the door and bring in younger individuals that they didn't have to pay as much.
Exactly.
So they offered it to everyone, not expecting younger individuals that have been there less than 10 years like me to take it.
Right.
But, I had a vision in mind of what I wanted to do, and I felt that severance package would help propel me and kind of push me off the edge, because I was playing it safe of like, I want to make this a career. I don't. I want to go in the arts, but I'm kind of scared. Let me keep my job. And then that opportunity came up, and I was like, this is a sign. I have to take it. I have to
chance I'm going to have.
Bet on myself.
Yep.
And I took that risk, and I've been kind of living off that for now, and kind of using it to help build my own business the way I see it.
Nice. So are you doing your modeling and acting in the Chicago area, or have you since got out of Chicago?
I'm still based in Chicago in terms of a lot of the jobs I'm getting, but I've been trying to expand my reach. So I've been, auditioning more, reaching out to people here in LA, in New York and Atlanta, a lot of the big entertainment hubs.
Nice.
Because again, just I think with any kind of job, it's a numbers thing. You just got to keep applying, you got to keep auditioning, and eventually someone will pick you and you'll get that chance.
Okay. If you were to have stayed with the financial job, what would have been like a potential path for you?
Yeah.
Like if somebody listening to this is like, awesome that you want to do that. I'm not acting. I'm not modeling. I'm not doing any of that. I'm not doing any of that. So what would if they were like, I want to stick to this is something that interests me. Is there more room for promotions? Is that if you're like, you're going to be a client manager, that's pretty much it. Yeah. What kind of...
So there was three kind of avenues you could have taken. Okay. You could have taken it where you're more on the actual dealing with the money side, where you're the one saying a client just gave us $1 million. This is what we're going to buy with that $1 million. And you're making the transactions.
Gotcha.
That's the portfolio manager side.
Okay.
Then you can go more of the research side, which is you're doing the research on all the products that we're buying. So, for example, municipal bonds, you're doing the research on the cities, the municipalities, and
Figuring out which
what's
ones
their
are the
health,
best.
what's their credit rating, how worthy of an investment is this?
Gotcha.
And then you can go the more sales route, which you're actually interacting with the client, you're bringing in the prospects, you're bringing in the money,
Gotcha.
so that we can use it. So there's 3 avenues you can take it.
Okay. And then is there, I mean, I always like to kind of say, like, is there a cap to promotion? Because I mean, I don't know, but I would think it would be really tough for somebody to come in as an analyst and eventually make it to CEO.
Yeah.
So is there like a limit or like a cap where you're like, this is about where you're gonna cap out? You might be the vice blah 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 to blah blah blah. You might be the whatever. Like, is there something? And there might not be. You might be like, oh no, you can kind of keep going or changing paths and keep moving up. But I don't know. Is there like a cap that you can be like, okay, once I hit this?
Yeah, I mean, usually, again, the company I worked for, a lot of the average tenure there was 15 years.
Okay.
So a lot of these people had worked there for a while. A few that were there were 35 years working there. So, it gets hard because then they're at the top. So there's not a lot of room to move. So usually, like, most of the time, if you want to get a big bump, you got to leave companies. But there was opportunities to be promoted, to change direction in terms of your career, within the company itself. But again, the big moves tend to come from you moving to another company versus like staying at the same. They'll give you a steady increase to keep you incentivized to stay, because once you plateau, you tend to lose your incentivation to work, the willingness to work when you're like, I'm not progressing, I'm not making more money. Why?
Gotcha.
So the bonuses and the title changes will help you. But again, if you wanted to go from like a senior vice president to C-level, you're usually going to have to change companies.
Okay. That makes sense. That you have to look for the openings and go for the openings, as opposed to just keep kind of either sitting there waiting for an opening at your own company, or...
It's rare that you'll get someone that's just sitting there and they'll just fall into a C-level, position. You have to kind of jump around, keep moving, and that will help you keep kind of elevating your title.
Okay. I came up with some questions as we were going through this that kind of hit my head that this might not be the place for them, but this is the place where I'm going to ask them. Is there any like process or something you have to do if you suspect fraud? So,
I mean, snitches get stitches. I believe. No, but
okay, that's the first part.
That's the first part. But
secondly,
they do a good job of giving you a telephone line, like email, like a department in itself that you reach out to if you do suspect fraud, especially in finance, because of all the housing crisis, everything.
I figured there's something.
Yeah, they implemented a pretty in-depth way of going about it. But again, it's hard to kind of say that this is fraud, because you could say like making decisions, like trading on your own portfolio based on the research that we have in the company is dictionary wise considered fraud. Sure. But a lot of time people are doing that. Yeah. You're using what you do in your work to make money for you on the side.
Gotcha.
Is someone going to blow the whistle on you? Not likely. But again, if you're dealing with millions of dollars, then that's where the whistleblowing comes in. But I myself never witnessed it, because I think it's also a matter of culture. And the people that I worked with, we're all up to standard.
If
people.
You all keep it on the up and up, then they're gonna know to keep it on the up and up too.
But again, we've all seen the headlines, and there are people, CEOs of like swindling money.
Well, whenever I hear finance, I always just think of like Wall Street, slick back hair, got the suit on, talking a mile a minute, and I'm like, what's even happening? Yeah. And then my wallet's gone, and they have all the money, and I'm like, what just happened? But no, that makes sense. It's not all that. I mean, there is the finance of like, hey man, we're here to make money. We're here to make you money, and let's just get this done. Yeah. And then my other question is, if you could give yourself a piece of advice now, like if you could go back in time and give it to yourself on your first day, is there something that you would tell yourself if you were like, oh man, I wish I could have known that back then?
Yeah. I would say it'd be more to be patient with myself, because I kind of put a lot of stress on myself to learn everything so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's weird how other people have more patience with you than you have with yourself.
Definitely.
And so, and then again, it's also to ask for help. You know, they
so
were
funny.
there. Everyone was there to say, hey, if you need help, help me. And I had to build up the courage, but
Sure.
I started out as, for example, like with client calls, I started out having senior analysts help me. Like
Right.
they would listen to my call and say, hey, you could have improved this, or hey, you could have talked about this. And so that helped me establish how I could do my own process, but still implement what the advice they gave me.
That's something that one of my other guests said too, is that something I would tell other people if they were going into this profession is don't be afraid to ask for help. Then something that my mom would always say too is people want to help.
Yeah.
Most people, if you're fine and you got your stuff figured out and somebody comes, it feels good to help somebody else. Like it makes you feel good of like, oh, okay, cool. They know what they're doing. You feel better about them doing their, so most people want to help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And patience. I mean, a lot of times I know that me especially, I like to be good at something right away. I don't want to take the time and the patience to like, okay, let's develop this skill. If I'm not good, I'm like, okay, I'm over it. Next thing. And it's like, well, you got to have a lot of patience with certain things.
Yeah.
So
Everyone was a beginner at one point,
that's great. Yeah.
So
That's a great way to put it. That's all I really have. Before we do finish up here, actually, is there something? I mean, I'm going to put Sam's Instagram in the description below. So whenever you guys are looking for a model or an actor, and, if you're a producer and you're like, hey, this is the guy, that's where you go to find him, get his info. But is there anything else you would like to talk to, a cause, something you want people to know, or just kind of keep in mind as they go about their days?
I think especially for what the kind of transition I made with my career, I made a 360. I even when I told my colleagues I was leaving to start an acting career, they're like, whoa, that came out of nowhere.
Right.
So I guess for me, it's more of saying that don't be afraid to start over. Don't be afraid to reinvent yourself. Because I think a lot of times, we feel like we get pigeonholed. Like, a lot of my friends were like, well, you've been a financier. How are you going to be an actor? It's like, well, that's what you see me as.
Right.
That doesn't mean I see myself as that.
Exactly.
So I allowed myself to be a beginner again, to struggle, to make mistakes. And I still continue to fail every day and fail forward, I'd like to say.
Yeah.
And just to allow myself to try. Because I think if we're so held up by fear of what may not even occur, we don't even try something. Yeah. And I mean, I'm a big advocate of fear is a false evidence appearing real. It's something we create in our head to blockade us from actually trying something, from actually going for what we in our heart want.
Right.
And I think, again, this world, this energy that we have, it's here to help us become our best selves. And so once you start putting that out there, that this is what I want to do with my life, you'll start to see opportunities open up. You'll start to see like people reach out to you, say, hey, I heard you're doing this. I think you could, sorry about that. I heard you could help with me on this. So, opportunities start to open up once you make that decision.
Right.
Once you say, I'm going to go after this wholeheartedly, things start happening for you.
And I mean, I think that's a great spot to end. I would like to thank Sam. Something you guys may or may not know that we didn't even touch on is Sam played minor league baseball at one point, so I'm going to have him on for a second episode to talk about that. So, but thank you, Sam, for being here with us. Thank you for sharing your story. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime.
Thanks for checking out another episode of the Jobology podcast, and big thanks to my in-studio guest, Sam. Hopefully we'll get to do a lot more in-studio guests here coming up. Before we go today, make sure you're following us on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. Also, please check us out on all social media platforms at Jobology Podcast. It really helps us out. And like we always say to end every episode, make good choices.